Almost entitled this. I think it would be very applicable. The life-changing word or message. Or we could call it the results of the new birth, which were discussed in verse 18 as we looked at last week. There are several imperatives through here, but I think the structure that hit my mind as I read through this, and I think it's a very apropos structure, is these three imperatives, commands. Number one, in verse 19 we are to hear. In verse 21, we are to receive. And then in verse 22, which is probably the theme of the whole book of James, we are to obey. Hear, receive, obey. That's a pretty good order. Now, let's look at this if we could, because I think there's many things you cannot see easily here in an English text, and we're going to try to look through that. And in your notes, I've given you many parallel passages, and I think that will help as you study this on your own. Now mine starts out, I'm using the Williams translations, you must understand this. Now really this is a little imperative. It means know this. The form here can be an imperative or an indicative, but because in the paragraph that starts chapter 1 verse 6, and also I think in the paragraph that starts chapter 2 verse 5, it's an imperative, this should also be an imperative. Know this. Know what? Well, in James, this little phrase, these imperatives, can link up with what goes before. Know about the new birth in verse 18, or it can link up with what's going after it. Know this, what I'm about to tell you. So it's really a transition statement between the new birth of 18 and what should the new birth do in your lives. And my friends, I just want to take a minute here and say to you that I think the crisis in the American church is this. We're not real sure what the new birth should do in our lives. And I want to tell you what, the only way we really know, according to 1 John and James, that we are really in the faith is because something happened to our lives when we met Jesus Christ. Deliver me from someone who says, oh, I know God, I know Christ, I've been saved, and there's no difference in the way they live. Warning lights go off across the Bible on that kind of profession, as we'll see in chapter 2 more specifically. So he says, listen to this, and he comes back to this theme, my dearly loved brothers. Boy, he's going to beat them with the gospel stick, but he does it because he loves them, because he knows real joy is found in following Christ, not just knowing about Christ. Know this, dearly loved brothers, everyone must be, and then three imperatives, bang, bang, bang. And are these so different than what we're used to? Be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to get angry. Anybody want to stand up? It's not what we do, is it? Now, I think there's a basic underlying theme through here. I'm going to lay it out for you and see if you'll buy it. I'm not sure it's right. I must admit, I think it's here, but I could give you about 4 or 5 examples, and I'm going to, but I'm not sure I've caught the author's intent. But here's what I think's happening. From chapter 3, it's going to be obvious that the early church worship service was very dynamic. We learned from 1 Corinthians 14 that people would get up and want to sing a song, people want to get up and want to speak in tongues, people want to get up and want to share the message, and they were just popping up here and there. It looks like James is talking about putting some structure on this dynamism. He's going to talk about teachers not being so willing to talk. Well, that kind of scares me. Talk about that we shouldn't be so quick to speak. We ought to be quick to listen, but not quick to speak and get angry. I think what we have here is many people wanting to speak for God. Many folks popping up wanting to give their opinion about what God meant about this or that. And then getting angry when someone else had a longer time than they did. There's some dynamism here as these early leaders struggled with how do we do church. And I think some of that underlines this, and I'll try to show you that. These are Proverbs. There are many places. Proverbs 16:27 is the one that I think beautifully expresses this thing about being slow to, listen quickly, but being slow to speak. I really think verses 22 through 25 is going to develop this listen. Listen well. And then I think this thing about the tongue, talking about not getting angry and not speaking, is going to be delineated even further in chapter 3. So really we're going to pick up in the next few verses on this very first imperative, be quick to listen. Now, for a man's anger does not produce the uprightness that God requires. I don't think anger is a sin, or you're going to have Jesus sinning. I don't think he cleansed the temple by saying, please get out, you big devils, out, out. No, he was pretty ticked off. Kicked over tables, let out animals, knocked over money changers. No, he was angry, made a whip of cords. Anger cannot be a sin, or Jesus sinned. But now Jesus was angry because of what people had done to God's house. I think there's a time when we should be angry about what's happening. There are some things we ought to be angry over. But my friends, this is anger seems to be connected with that I didn't get my way. Church didn't do it the way I want to do it. I'm upset because so-and-so got to talk and I didn't, or this or this. I want to say, whenever we get angry, there's no way we can adequately reflect or relate the love of God in an angry posture. Just like the children of Israel misreflected who God is. Angry Christians muddy the water so badly in trying to communicate Jesus to others. Anger does not have a place in communicating the love of God. Now, let me continue then. In verse 21, does your Bible have strip yourselves of everything impure? Do you have the word strip there? It's kind of a graphic term. This is one of several places in Paul where taking off one's soiled garments is used as a metaphor of ridding one's life of immoral or pagan characteristics. So strip yourself is the idea of us having dirty clothing and us taking those dirty clothing and laying them aside. And that's what this word is. You can see it in Romans 13:12. You can see it in Ephesians 4:22 and 25. You can see it in Colossians chapter 3, verse 8, 10, and 12. Strip yourself, remove. And the word impure is a very interesting word. Originally, it meant someone who had too much wax in their ear. Gross, I know, but that's what it meant. What would be the condition of someone who had too much wax in their ear? What would be their characteristic? Not itching their ear with their finger, but they couldn't hear, right? That's the problem. These folks were so ready to start talking, they weren't listening. So the metaphor kind of means listen. Be ready to listen to others. Now, there's a possibility this word means vulgarity. And again, it might be related to this jealousy, backbiting between the church, between Christian leaders wanting to have this place of authority and that place. Real possibility here. It could be vulgarity or wax buildup in your ear. We're not real sure exactly what it means, but because of James chapter 2, verse 2, where the same word is used of dirty clothing, I think really here it just means this metaphor of dirty clothing as an immoral life. Now, there's a strange little phrase that follows next. Look at your Bibles. And all the evils prevailing around you. Do some of you have a translation that says something like residue of evil? Do you have something like that? Boy, commentators have fought over this, and we're not real sure. Some say that this phrase could mean vicious talk. Now, if it means vicious talk, we're right back to this metaphor of hair pull among the early church. This dynamic worship where nobody seemed to be in control, no structure, vying for a time to speak. I'm not real sure. Most interpreters say that it means that when they came out of paganism, if they're Gentiles been saved, or even Jews would come to know the Lord, and they had a lot of practices in their life that would not be Christian. And they are encouraged to remove everything of their life that's not what God wants, not Christ-like. And of course, all of us have a residue of evil, don't we? I mean, who of us would have said that we've arrived spiritually and there's still no sin or rebellion in our life? But we need to continue to work at that. We can't say, well, that's just the way I am. Well, yuck. You need to remove the residue of evil, right? Keep working on that Christ-like attitude. Keep striving for the upward call of God. I think it's something like that. Now, notice it says in humble spirit. Now, this is a very interesting word. It's used in classical Greek, Plato, Socrates, of the golden mean. Somebody who has a balanced, self-controlled life. It may have that kind of connotation here. It obviously means instead of a spirit of anger and malice and jealousy, we're to do something else in a different kind of attitude. Now, I think verse 21 has both aspects of the gospel. In my opinion, there are two things that we are required to do about the gospel. God always takes the initiative and comes first. He always woos us and draws us to himself. John 6:44 and 65. No one comes to the Father unless the Holy Spirit draws them. But when the Holy Spirit draws us, what do we do? Well, these are the two things. Stripping ourselves of all that's impure is another way of talking about repentance, a turning away from what we know is not the will of God. And then welcoming in humility the Word is another way of talking about receiving the message about Christ. And not only do we receive the message about Christ, but really in Christianity, we receive the person of Christ. For Christianity is primarily not a creed, not a religious act, but a relationship with the living, resurrected Christ. We enter into a relationship, not into a theology, not into a creed, not even into a ritual, but into a relationship. Welcome the message. This is used many times like that. You might want to see Acts 17:11 for that use of this same term, welcome. Now, notice where it says, it's going to use three metaphors now to describe this word that we're to welcome and receive. Three metaphors. Number one, it's an implanted seed. Now, that is a very difficult phrase. The structure here seems to imply it's something that's already in man. We're to receive the already implanted word. Now, that just doesn't make good sense, but maybe it does. If verse 18, which I talked about last time, is referring not to spiritual rebirth, being born again, being saved, but what if it was talking about original creation, that man is made in the image of God? Every human being in the world tonight is in the image of God. There is something of God in every human heart. Marred though it may be, fallen though it may be, rebellious though it may be, there's something of God in man because we're made in God's image. Maybe it's this image of God that when we receive Christ is transformed and empowered and perfected. Maybe it's this image that it's talking about, this implanted word. I think it's a beautiful thing that we're to receive with humility this implanted word. I hate to bring it up in a bunch of Baptists, but I'm going to do it. We have real problems about this implanted word. The parable of the sower has always been difficult for us, Matthew 13. Because it seems to imply that a seed that germinates can then be lost. And Baptists have always been nervous about what we call the security of the believer or falling from grace. But I want to submit to you, and I hope you'll look at Matthew 13, that the seed, which is the Word of God, exactly this phrase here, the Logos, falls on four kinds of soils. One kind of soil is really the path through the field the people walk on. The birds get that. Jesus said Satan takes the seed before it ever germinates. There are three other kinds of soil, though. The seed germinates. It even says they receive the Word with joy. But in one patch of ground, there's a rocky underledge. And when the sun gets up and gets hot, the ground gets very hot. There's no depth for the root to find moisture. So the seed germinates, but the seed dies. Another, the field is all plowed. It all looks like good soil, but there's some weed roots here you can't see. But the weed roots are already established, and they grow up quicker than the brand new seed. So the seed germinates, but the roots from the weeds just come up and surround it, and it finally withers because the weeds are stronger. Jesus said this refers to the pressures of life and the temptations of life. Here we have three groups of seeds that germinate, but the only one that's really in the will of God, I'll go so far as to say the only one that really has a relationship with Christ is not the germination of the seed, but the what? The fruit bearing. Now this is a very important thing. I think all of us have been confronted with the tragedy of someone we know who's come down and made a profession of faith. But for what reason? They've got their feelings hurt, they've got mad, the pressures of life, and they're suddenly gone, and we never see them again. But we hear their life is not for the Lord and living in a world and along the world's guidelines. And we wonder to ourselves, what is the deal? My friends, I submit to you that the biblical evidence for true salvation is not how high someone jumps. It's how straight they walk when they land. You see, real Christianity is manifested in a lifestyle, not in a happy moment. Now, it starts in a happy moment. I'm all for evangelicalism, but evangelicalism that does not issue it in a changed life is strangely unbiblical. We are not out to sell tickets to heaven. We are out to manifest relationships with Jesus that move through time. Amen or oh me? Sometimes you just got to ask yourself, you know. Now, notice it, if you would, where it mentions here then that this enrooted, implanted word is able to save your souls. Now, I want to say to you, I don't think we have a soul. You know, Descartes said that the human soul was in the pituitary gland. Oh, yuck. What does a philosopher know about pituitaries? I don't think we have a human soul. I think we are a human soul. Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. God made man out of the dust of the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, breathed into him the breath of life, and man became a living nephesh. Soul. Our bodies are the outward extremities of our souls. We are a soul. And this wonderful word from God can change us and save us and make us brand new. Notice when it continues then. Keep on obeying this message. I think verse 22 could probably be the theme of the whole book of James. Jesus put it so well when he spoke to those followers when he was alive and crowds were following him and all these people. And he turned one day and said, "Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not the things that I tell you to do?" It's so easy to sit in church and sing great hymns about the blood and faith and then go out and live a godless life in the world, and there's something sick about that. If we really know him on Sunday, it's going to be expressed on Monday through Friday in every relationship of our life, including our home, our business, and our recreation. We have segmented life into sacred and secular, and we think we can divide light up and play games with God. I want to say, if you know God, it's going to impact every aspect of your life. This trick is we're trying to play little games with God where we attend church and then live our lives the way we want to, away from God and his principles and his guidelines. And I tell you, it's a fake and it ain't going to work. If you love him, he says, you're going to keep my commandments. You ought to look not only at Luke 6:46, which I just quoted, but you ought to also look at Luke 11:28. Obedience is an evidence of a true profession. Don't tell me how much you love God. Show me how much you love God. It continues, I think, very powerfully here. Keep on obeying this word, this message, and do not be merely, now mine says do not merely listen to it. You probably have do not be hearers only. This is a very wonderful Greek word. This was a word of people who attended lectures of the philosophers but never joined the group. You mean there are people who come to our churches and carry our Bibles and use our vocabulary and they listen and they know what it's all about, but they've never really committed themselves to it? Exactly. Have all the trappings of Christianity but don't know the power. 2 Timothy 3:5. Isaiah 29:13. These people draw close to me with their lips, but their lives are far from me. And their religion is basically of what they learned from other men by rote. Oh, God, help us. Sometimes we look religious, but it's not the religion of God. It's the religion of men and rules and things. When what God wants is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week relationship by faith with him, walking in what you do understand from the book. Do not be merely hearers or listen to it and so deceive yourselves. This is a very important construction in Greek. It's a middle voice verb that means somebody is playing a game and they're playing this game with God and they have really tricked themselves into thinking there's something that they're not. Look what it says here. It talks about religion. You have that in your down there in your text. They think themselves to be religious. This word means they're very scrupulous about religious details. They don't do this, and they do this, and they do this just the right way. Folks, we have got mixed up between rituals and relationship. You can do all the right things and bust hell wide open. And you can be a poor, humble person and not know all the right things to do, but have a genuine, sweet relationship with Jesus and have a happy, fruitful, abundant, joyful life. Oh, I think we play games in the American church this way. Do not be hearers, but be doers. Too many just hear and deceive themselves. Verse 23, for if, this is a first-class conditional sentence in Greek, assumed to be true, for since there are people like this. People like what? If anyone merely listens to the message without obeying it, he is like a man who looks in a mirror at his own face. Now, some have face of birth here. It's a difficult Greek phrase. I have no earthly idea what it means for sure. But this is the picture. In the ancient world, they had mirrors made out of metal, sometimes silver, but more commonly bronze and the cheaper metals. They were polished. They were not a real good representation, but it was good enough to see yourself. It's like somebody came and looked in the mirror, and they saw themselves. There I am. Where's my life going? What is my life all about? Am I really happy? What am I doing with myself? Why do I make the choices? They look at themselves, but they quickly turn away. And suddenly, as they turn away, Another verb tense in Greek. They get into a state of turning away from God. They saw the truth. They're responsible, but they turned away. And they go quickly off on their own life. How many people have felt the pull of God in their life, felt God speak to them at some place about some issue or something, be it salvation or the way they live? And they didn't want to hear that. People only want to hear God when God says what they want to hear. They see the truth. They know the truth, but they reject it. I could put it in terms of John like this. Light has come into the world, but men have loved darkness more than light because their deeds are... It's not ignorance we have here, it's rebellion. And these are religious men. These are the folks that are supposed to be religious that are doing this. Let me continue, please. He is like a man who looks in the mirror at his own face, but he looks briefly and then goes off in a settled way of being away, and once, aorist, completed action, forgets what he saw. But the man who looks, different, totally different Greek word. This is a word that means to gaze intently. The other word meant a fleeting glance. This means to gaze intently. As the angels, John 20, verse 5 and 11, gazed into the tomb, looked and looked. The two women, gazed in the tomb. This is that word for a long gaze. Here's one guy who acts religious, but he just hears and doesn't do. Here's another. And he's enamored with the word. He's enamored with the message. He pores over it. He meditates over it. He thinks about it. And look what happened. He gazes intently at the flawless law that makes men free. You may have the law of liberty. You say, what is this law of liberty? Well, if you look down in chapter 2, verse 8, it's the same thing. It's translated a little different. It's called the royal law, the law of the king. If you look at chapter 2, verse 12, it says the law that treats them as free. You know what's always amazed me? The gospel really sets people free. And you know what we do? We say, I'm free. And we think that means we can sin. We take our freedom as a license for personal reasons. I want to say to you that what the real freedom of the law is, that we're free not to sin. In Adam, all of us are sinners. We have no choice. But in the gospel, when something happens to our life, now we come to the place that we don't have to sin. We can choose again. And what do we choose? If we gaze at this wonderful law that makes men free, we're going to stay free. We're going to stay free from religious rules that are just man-made rules. We're going to stay from pagan practices. We're going to stay free because the gospel has really made us free. And he keeps on looking, proving himself to be not a forgetful hearer, but an actual doer of what the law requires, will be blessed in what he does. Verse 26, if anyone, this is a first-class conditional sentence. Since there are people like this, this is true. What is true? He thinks that he's religious. He seems to be. It's not the word seems. King James has seem. It's not somebody, we see somebody over there doing and say, oh yeah, he kind of seems. No. It's someone who thinks in their own mind, hey, I'm religious. Hey, I'm pretty good. I'm a real person of faith. Okay? If you're a real person of faith, there's going to be some characteristics in your life. This word religion, again, think what I'm saying. It means a scrupulous observation of the details of religion. Come at the right time, say the right thing, do the right thing. Many people have a meticulous religiosity. They don't know Christ. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, he deceives himself, and his religious worship is worthless. Martin Luther once said, be careful of your tongue. It's in a wet place and liable to slip. I submit to you that things that we build up for years and years in the church of God can be destroyed with one swift movement of the organ we call the tongue. Don't tell me how much you love God and absolutely devastate everybody else around you. Talk about people, cut them down. I submit to you that your tongue is the expression of your heart. And Jesus said it's not what goes in a man that defiles him, it's what comes out. And what we speak comes out of the heart, and the issues of the heart are manifest by what we say. And we have people that just say, oh, I'm religious, But folks, you get them away from this building and it doesn't sound like it. I submit to you, how we talk in a real sense gives evidence of who we are. This is going to be developed completely in chapter 3, so I dare not pursue it here too much. I think it picks up in verse 19 where it talks about don't be quick to speak. It's going to pick up completely in the problem in the early church with their teachers in chapter 3, and right now it makes an allusion to it. This religious worship is worthless. Well, that scares me to death. I think you ought to write down Isaiah 29:13. Look at it later. I think you ought to write down Matthew 15:8 through 9. I think you ought to write down 2 Timothy 3:5 and read those. God help us. We need to examine ourselves. Verse 27. Religious worship. And here it's going to try to describe that what is really religious worship. He uses the word pure and stainless. These are terms used for sacrificial animals. What is true religion, we might say? He gives two things here. Very important. He gives a negative and a positive. This is not a full definition of religion. Just like Micah chapter 6 verses 6 through 8 is not a full definition, but it is a true set of guidelines. And here's what he said. Number one, if you really have a religion that comes from God, number one, you're going to look after orphans and widows in their trouble. Now, orphans and widows is the emphasis of the book of Deuteronomy. And many Psalms, I've given you in your notes the cross-references. Do you mean if I really know God, it's going to impact the way that I love my fellow man? I submit to you that you cannot claim to know God and not treat your fellow Christian with great respect and love. 1 John says it so powerfully. How can you say you love your brother? Say you love God whom you have not seen and hate your brother whom you have seen. 1 John says you're a liar and the truth's not in you. You mean that I, as a Christian, have a responsibility for my brother? That's exactly what I mean. You say, that sounds like social gospel. Sign me up. For a gospel that's not social is not a gospel. If knowing Jesus doesn't change the way you treat people, I don't want anything to do with it. I submit to you that if we do not love and serve, there's something really wrong with our relationship with Christ, because we're supposed to manifest who He is, and folks, He laid down His life. It's not only helping others, it's not only a social action, it's not only a positive helping of other Christians, but look at the second part. And to keep oneself unstained, another sacrificial term, by the world. Boy, James 4:4, listen to this. You faithless wives, do you not know that friendship of the world means enmity with God? For whosoever wants to be a friend of the world puts himself down as an enemy to God. Turn over to 1 John chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. Listen to this. Oh, you need to hear this. I need to hear this. God help us. Our culture has grabbed us. For I am writing to you, my dear little children, because for His sake your sins have been forgiven. I could just spit. I got the wrong reference. It is chapter 2, verses 15 through 17. 1 John 2, 15 through 17. Stop loving the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone persists in loving the world, there is no love for the Father in his heart. Because everything that is in the world, the things that our lower nature and eyes are longing for, the proud pretensions of life, do not come from the Father, but from the world. And the world is passing away with its evil longings. But whosoever perseveres in doing God's will lives on forever. What James is saying, friend, if you were taken to court for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? Evidence from how you treat others, and evidence from your personal lifestyle. You know, one reason why the church doesn't really change modern culture is because the church has been captured by modern culture. The church reflects modern culture, not the Bible. And we don't even realize there's a problem. The real question is, your life is like your daddy. Who is your daddy?